Good morning, I'm Sherilyn Moore with Building Hope. We're here today with the winners of our second annual Building Hope Impact Summit and Awards. And our topic today is going to be about the effects of the pandemic and how their schools, their very successful schools, have handled what had happened with the students, with their administration, with their teachers, and what they've done to overcome, and to share that with you today. Thank you. So, group, hi guys, how are you? Thank you for being here.
Good morning.
Jenna, if you'd like to start, tell us a little bit about your school, about Galileo, and how the pandemic had impacted you, and if you'll also include what state your school is in.
I work at Galileo School for Gifted Learning, and we're in Florida. And the pandemic effect was interesting because we opened earlier than a lot of states did. And so there was kind of a fear a little bit. There was a fear with the kids, there was a fear with the teachers. And that if there's a fear with the teachers, there's even more fear with the kids, right? So we spent a lot of time reassuring the teachers when we came in that first time back, and we were doing pre-plan, and we had just opened a campus. So we opened during the pandemic. We spent the entire time focusing on teacher wellness. So all of our PD, that first professional development, was teacher wellness, taking care of yourself so that you can take care of the children. And there was no emphasis at all on academics. So it's safe, happy, and then learning is like a far, yes, we want them to get something, but it wasn't the focus. The health and safety was the focus.
How did you feel like that worked for you? How's your teacher retention with that? How did people make it through the pandemic? Was that a good approach, you feel?
I think that especially that first year, again, opening a school, and all these people were supposed to have opportunities to shadow at the other campus and to feel comfortable with the Galileo way. They didn't get those chances. And so a lot of them came in like, I don't know what I'm doing. I'm nervous about this. And to make them feel confident, comfortable, pretty much everyone on that Skyway campus that first year stayed. We didn't have anyone leave.
That's great. And I remember I had the opportunity to be at your school during that time, and it was one of the first schools around the country. Actually, Florida opened up in the middle of the pandemic. And I remember a big concern was, what are the children? The children aren't going to wear their masks. The kids were fantastic. And they just they had their styling masks of all different kinds, and they were super cute, and they'd walk around, and they had no problem with it. It was more the adults, right, that had the challenges. So what were some of your other experiences? Anybody can jump in. Sam?
Sure, because we were on the exact opposite end of the spectrum. So Legal Prep is located in Chicago, Illinois. We took the approach of, not we, but the city of Chicago and state of Illinois was basically closed for 15 months. So we were all remote during the end of 2020, the entire next school year. And the impact of that decision, there's been some tremendous effects and not positive. So we saw a widening of the achievement gap. We serve predominantly African American community, so achievement gap widening, socialization took a real big hit. So students came in. We basically had two brand new freshman classes, even though one of them were nominally sophomores. They were, had never stepped foot in a high school before. Mental health took a big hit. So there were some real challenges coming out of that we had to deal with.
What do you guys think is the biggest challenge? He's mentioned a number of them. Or what
I would say I'm with Health Leadership High School in Albuquerque, New Mexico. So I would say that mental health is probably one of the biggest challenges. We've seen quite a few individuals since come to school. The freshmen that were started when the pandemic happened, they're graduating now, and the immaturity and it's just unbelievable. Not to mention the anxiety. The anxiety is horrendous with a lot of our youth. So we are in the process of providing plenty of trauma-informed care for our teachers and our students, because the anxiety is so heightened since the pandemic.
Yeah. Are you feeling that too? Both?
We're definitely feeling it with our students. During the pandemic, for us being in a multicultural community, keeping track of our students was very big, and making sure that we had resources to reach out to parents to make sure that we could lay eyes on our kids.
And how many languages do your parents speak? They're in Decatur, Georgia.
Decatur, Georgia. We have over 30 different languages spoken in our community. So being able to put together our resources to be able to communicate to our families, both written as well as oral, was huge to make sure that we had that engagement during those early months of going virtual. Not to mention, a lot of our families are not necessarily, the adults are not well adept with technology. So that was also a major barrier for our kids, was having adequate internet access. A lot of our students were logging in from a smartphone, which is not ideal. Even though they had laptops, that doesn't necessarily mean you have internet access at home.
So we all have this shared experience, right? But the experience in and of itself is a little bit different, right? From opening smack dab in the middle of the pandemic to being shuttered for forever and community. I think it just kind of it pulled back the lid maybe on some of the real life challenges that all schools face every day. We hear sometimes people say that schools have no business teaching mental health. And I want to dig into a little bit about what are some of the things you are doing for the students, why it's important, and what are some of the things you're doing for your teachers and why that's important. So what do you think? How is True North handling
So at
those
True
things?
North, we did find, so there's two pockets of issues that we have. So we have our new students that are new to True North when this happened, and then our returning students. So they both have different set of problems. At True North, because it is in Florida, we were able to open right away, like you said. And what we noticed with our own students was not necessarily gaps in their learning, but a little bit of the anxiety, and also not turning in work on time. So where we had a structure that work was turned in on time, we found that we had to give grace because of all the online issues that we had to turning in classwork assignments. So that fell into the school after the pandemic. So we're still struggling with that. Absenteeism is another thing. So where prior to the pandemic, when we sent students to school with a slight cold, now parents keep them at home. So the absences have increased. Now regarding the mental health, we were able to add 2 counselors to our school so that they're able to meet the needs of our students, which has been extremely helpful. So we have a middle school counselor and elementary counselor at our other campus, and we recently got a high school counselor. So, you know, it's just there to be able to, they can share and talk, and they're there at all times for the kids.
So just having some regular talk therapy for them.
Yeah.
Now, what are some of the other things you guys are doing?
So we have our executive director actually is a social worker by profession as well as I am, and we have 2 other social workers and 4 social work interns. So we do place quite a bit an emphasis on mental health. One of the things that we're doing for mental health for the teachers is we're providing something called trauma-centered, trauma-sensitive yoga. It basically is a kind of yoga that was founded by Bessel van der Kolk and David Emerson, and it was a study that a 10-week study that they did with 25 women who were suffering from PTSD as a result of domestic violence. They found that doing the yoga twice a week for 10 weeks, at the end, they could no longer be diagnosed with PTSD. So we provide the yoga. We have a trauma-centered, trauma-sensitive yoga teacher, who's the only one in the state of New Mexico, who comes in once a week and does yoga with the teachers on our professional development day. We are offering that to our students next semester, or next year, I should say. And we also provide, I'm trying to introduce the same language for everyone, the students and the teachers. So we're working with providing education around DBT, dialectical behavior therapy, which is, of course, mindfulness, being in the moment, coping skills, that kind of thing.
That's awesome. So how does, I'm fascinated with trauma-informed yoga. right? So what is the difference, right, between trauma-informed yoga and, I mean, there's many, many branches of yoga, right? But really what makes that unique?
That's a great question. What makes it unique is that it is all invitational. It's invitational, it's not coercive. And so when the instructor is not giving directions, but they invite the participants to join, and they don't have to do exactly what the instructor is saying, it's whatever their body feels. You're giving power back to the individual during, when you're suffering through a trauma, you don't have a choice. So basically you're giving them a choice.
That is really interesting. Is that, and I feel like that might be reflected in what we're now doing with education as well.
Absolutely.
Is it?
Yeah. I think you brought up an interesting point as far as, is this the space that we should be in as educators in the educational sector? I was at a conference recently where the lead speaker mentioned that it used to be when things would happen to communities that people would run to churches for support. Well, now they run to schools. And so failure to provide resources for your community in some aspects is neglect. And so is this where we should be? Absolutely. I think this is what's next for education, is being able to provide those wraparound supports for your community. So when we talk about mental health awareness, when we talk about the whole child, it's only natural, I think, that those supports come up out of education, because they spend a lot of time with us. So it's only natural that we're doing those things for our students and our families and the community if they can benefit from it.
Yeah.
Our kids benefit from the conscious discipline strategies that we use. We help them, because you had brought up choice, that they have a choice. And conscious discipline, that's the focus. It's like, yes, you have a structure. Yes, you have routines. You have these things. They make you feel safe. And then the other part of that is the safety that you feel from knowing that you may do this, you may do this, you may not do this. So it's like you have a choice, and then this is kind of the, please don't do that. And I think that really helps our kids to have the same feeling that adults can get. They feel like they have some control in their lives. And that's, it's great at a school, it's great at home. Anywhere that you can kind of do that is going to be helpful for kids that have gone through a trauma.
Absolutely. I think part of the importance of educating your teachers and your staff around trauma is that, they need to understand that if the students are coming to school with trauma and they're thinking about something that happened last night, or, their parents, arguing, or some may be out in the streets or whatever, that's going to give them a really hard time to focus on their education, on math, on science, on English. They can't. So with the trauma-informed care and the services we provide, it helps them to learn how to focus better, and to work through some of that trauma so that they can achieve academically.
I think that's an understanding that needs to be brought out a little bit, is why. Why is it so important? I hear safety, I hear you have to get through that so you can get to this, but like, why is it so important for schools to take that role in these students' lives?
I guess the better question is, why not? There you go. I mean, if you think about it, it's still TBD, the impact that the pandemic is going to have. And I think that a lot of experts have underestimated just the long-standing, lasting effects that this is going to have on society. So I see a lot of these things that we're doing in our schools as being proactive versus reactive. Why wait till, these young kids are now members of society and we've not addressed the true impact that this pandemic has had? And that's 20, 30 years down the road. I mean, we do not know. So I see a lot of the things that we're doing as being proactive.
And it's required, right? Like, we're measured ultimately on our academic results. You can't get those results if you don't do this as a baseline, right? You have to address these mental health concerns, you have to address these social emotional issues, and if you don't do that, you can't expect to get the academic results. And depending on where you're located, not getting those results can have dire consequences. So there's also a self-preservation component, but it's also just the right thing to do.
And I don't think people realize how simple trauma-informed care really is. When you explain it, it is, simply treating people like human beings. You know, they come through the door. Oh, hi, how are you? Nice to meet you. I'm Denise. Please come in, sit down, let's talk. It's not, here's your application, go ahead and fill it out. We'll be with you in a minute. It's basically being very personable and making sure that that person knows that they're important.
And it's the same
And that
thing
you
for
care.
little kids. Yeah, it's the same thing for little kids. So it's standing at the door. It's what, you know, greeting every kid. And it doesn't have to be like some fancy, I have a different handshake for every, you know, those are really cool. They're very cool. But I mean, I tell my teachers, if you are standing at the door and you genuinely smile, and maybe you do, because right now we used to do like hug, handshake, you know, those things. And maybe some kids, because of the trauma of this, don't feel comfortable touching. We always put a very heavy focus on touch, because there's something about that. If I touch you and I look at you in the eye, there's something about that. And now we have some kids, due to the trauma, that don't want to be touched, or they're not used to that. And so sometimes that's the way that you give trauma-informed care, right? Like, is by knowing what is comfortable for them and still being willing to meet them exactly where they are. And I've seen them warm up.
If we want to go back in time, instead of going back in time to be authoritarian, maybe going back in time to be kind human beings, just as the number one start, it's not radical, but it seems like it's needed a lot. Yeah, so I feel like that would encapsulate it a little bit. Anybody disagree?
It was really handy. It was handy for us because that's what we founded the school on anyway. Do you know what I mean? Like, you saw it when you came in. It's just everybody knows everyone. We care about each other. Everybody's kid is our kid. So it doesn't matter, you know, our janitor walks around and everyone's like, Mr. Richard, thank you for what you do. And he knows every kid's name too. And so it's, you know, just treating each other, like you said, like human beings, not expecting them to do things just because sometimes you have to do things that you have to do in the real world. I don't believe in that.
What's funny is that also you take things for granted. So our school is very virtue-based, and we start every single morning in our morning assembly, where we gather as a group and we read great stories, have discussions about virtue. And at a point in time, sometimes it felt like people would take, or students or teachers would take that for granted. But when we came back from the pandemic, we weren't able to really hold assembly because you had to keep 6 feet apart. Right. So when we kept hearing the kids saying, we miss assembly, teachers missed assembly. So when we were able to start it, it was something that they were able to look forward to it. So I think that kindness and the virtues and just being a human being, that is part of who we are. And sometimes we take that for granted, but it put things into perspective, this whole time of being apart from each other.
And I think everybody came together.
It did. We did,
Teachers
yeah.
came together to help one another, students. You know, one of the things that we did with our students were we have paid internships so that the students can go out and work to help provide for their families, because most of them are first generation immigrants from Mexico. And so what we did was the students that had internships, they were actually getting on the phone and calling you know, different assisted living homes to try and get those individuals to go and get their vaccines. So they were getting paid for that through their internships. And so it was keeping them busy and doing something really positive at the same time.
How did you guys set that up?
We work with a program called Future Focus. So, and they're all about bettering the community, through bettering the community, healthier communities, and advancing education where, you know, maybe disadvantaged population.
So how do you build a community within your school?
One of the things that we did was we've actually gotten rid of our PTA. So, and that probably sounds counterintuitive, but but one of the things statistically is that PTAs typically serve those who have the louder voices and oftentimes have more access to resources. So in a school like ours, where we're often divided by, or divided by culture, language, and so forth, PTAs don't actually work well for us because our families who are not able to communicate for themselves they're going to not participate because of that. So one of the things that we've done is we've got a beloved family community council. And so what that is representation from all of our major language groups. And so those folks come together and meet to talk about issues impacting our community, and they are the voice representative for the language groups that they represent. So they're able to take that information back to their respective communities to get that feedback. That's cool. So it provides a level playing field so that everyone's voice counts and everyone is heard. And oftentimes with traditional PTAs, that's not the case.
No, or you have to be the person that has time in the middle of the day to come to your kid's school when most people are working, and that's like PTA 2.0
And
or
also
3.0.
PTA oftentimes, PTAs are great, but oftentimes they're fundraising arms too for schools. But when you're a Title I school where over 60% of your students are on free and reduced lunch, that model doesn't work well.
Right, right. But I love this beloved community. Wow, that's
really
amazing.
cool. Yeah.
What about
everything you say, like since I met you, like I want to do more of that.
two? Let's do that too. I know. Well, what are some of the ways that you guys are developing community?
For us, when you say community, I think about our advisory system. So think like homeroom on steroids. We basically divvy up our freshmen when they come through the door, divide them into groups, put them with an advisor, and they stick with that group and with that advisor for all 4 years. So really develops like a brotherhood or sisterhood with that group, because for now, same gender, and they sort of build this bond. And what you see is the quality of the advisor a lot of times determines the success of the group. So you will see cohorts go through with a much higher persistence rate than other groups because of the strength of an advisor or the bond that the group has.
Sounds like Hogwarts.
A little bit, yes. Yeah, exactly. We've talked about doing something like that with house points and stuff. Yeah.
I love it. I love it. So tell us a little bit more for those who are, kind of watching our conversation. What is an advisory group? Like, how does that work? What is it?
So it's important for us. We build in time every single day for this group to get together. And it's not a lot of time because you need obviously as many instructional minutes as you can get, but 20 minutes a day, actually 22 minutes a day, if I want to be exact, we build in for this group to be together. We have built out a curriculum for it. So if a teacher's like, I'm not sure what to do with my group, we have activities built that they can do. Others that are veterans and have brought multiple groups through to graduation will kind of develop their own things and have a system in place, and it involves a lot of parent contact. So if a kid is not doing well, they're calling home at least weekly saying, hey, so-and-so is not doing well in their English class, here's what they need to do to bring the grade up. And the outcome for the advisor too, they get to hand the kid their diploma when they walk across the stage
Oh, that's
for 4 years.
Yeah.
So are the advisors just also have teaching roles? They're just teachers, and this is their special group that they keep an eye on?
It's teachers. We use a lot of different folks in the building. Right. We're a small school, so we've used deans, counselors, but it primarily teachers, and this is the group. And you'll see them go and during their prep period and seek out a kid who missed advisory and try to figure out if they're okay. But they kind of have, they take very much a vested interest in this group of kids.
We use the advisory program as well. Yeah, and our advisors are, they're sort of like mentors. The students really come to them. As most of you probably know, that it takes that one person to connect with the student to actually, once they connect with that one person that believes in them and can encourage them, you can almost guarantee success, right? So that's their role, to meet with the student every day. They do the credit tracking. They sort of serve as a sounding board for the students when they have things going on. That's also where we teach them the dialectical behavior therapy skills, as well as talk about world issues.
So tell us a little bit more about dialectical behavior therapy.
Dialectical.
Because you're like, of course we just do that. We're all like, what does that mean? What does that mean?
So DBT, dialectical behavior therapy, is it's a type of therapy that it was actually created by Marsha Linehan, who was a a therapist who suffered from borderline personality disorder. And so she came up with this idea, or from practicing, just learning how to be in the moment, learning how to use specific skills, interpersonal skills, some distress tolerance skills, some mindfulness skills, and using those type of skills to help you cope with situations in the moment, basically. And they're great for students, who come from a lot of trauma, because it helps them kind of stop and breathe and think about, wait, how should I react? But the coping skills teach them that. So that's kind of what it is in a nutshell.
That's awesome. I think we all could use that.
Absolutely.
I don't think you need to be traumatized. We all could use a little mindfulness and breathing.
So you guys have these great things that you're talking about, and my brain, when you talked about community, went to a completely different place. And so it's like, oh, we're doing therapy and we have mentorships in Hogwarts, which I think is awesome, by the way.
We do.
But my first thought was creative productivity. Right, so we have creative productivity, something we do every afternoon. It's the kids' favorite part of the day. It's basically an opportunity for the kids to engage in something they're passionate about. So they get to select where they go, they spend some time there. Generally the teacher is very passionate about that thing as well, and the students guide it. But what made me think of community was that the kids don't just stay with their teachers for it. They go to other teachers, and they can go to maybe a teacher they had in the past, or maybe they're going to go to one that they're going to have a couple years down the road. And so they get to interact with all of the teachers, and it's not just, these are my kids, this is what I do. They're all, I've said this before, they're all our kids. Yeah. And I might teach you tomorrow, so I need to we need to have a relationship, and they really do that. Everybody has relationships with the kids, and it's, yeah.
We started talking about community, something a few years ago called the Student Symposium. So we shut down school for the whole day, and we get together as a community, students and faculty, and we bring in speakers, and we have different virtues that we talk about. So this last one that we just did was on courage. So we brought a speaker in to talk to the kids about courage and what does that look like? What does that mean? And we also divide the students into groups with faculty, and they discuss 2 texts based on whatever the virtue was, which was courage. And they have great discussions for about, like we're doing here, for the 45 minutes, just talking about the text and what that text means to them. And then when it's all finished, we have free time with the faculty. So the faculty and the students are playing basketball or volleyball, or just building that community. It's that friendship, not only with students, but it's also a friendship with faculty. We have a faculty member, it was beautiful, he plays the guitar. And so he just started playing the guitar and singing, and a group of students just gathered around him. We're talking about athletes, non-athletes, and just building that community. And that's been really successful at our school.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
It feels like community is almost synonymous with just connection.
Yeah.
Right? It doesn't have to be, if you've had a trauma, it doesn't have to be anything. It's just to have those connections. And those connections, they not only help the academic achievement, but they do also then help with the social and emotional and the trauma and all that, just having that connected. So we need to be kind, we need to be connected. And are there any other things that if we wanted to share other kind of suggestions for people about how to manage this post-pandemic world that we're in now, right? Because everybody has, all the students, all the teachers, and you, we all have a new paradigm. And I think, to your point, nobody really knows what the long-term impact's going to be. But we're starting with kindness, connection, community. We're getting there, right? What are some of the other things that we might share that could help get over some of those humps? Because I also, particularly with charter schools, why I was asking who does that, is we're all doing it on not full funding, right? So 71 cents out of the dollar, you can't, people are like, how am I going to do this in my school? I'm barely surviving. I can't buy, hire another person. I can't do another thing. What are some of those things they can do? What do you think?
Well, I'll go back to her word of grace. I mean, That's free. There's no price tag attached to grace, and I think that what we saw that was prevalent after COVID, during COVID, is that everyone comes to the table with a different story, and it was more profound than ever during those early days. So a lot of our teachers were showing up as not only teachers, but parents themselves, having to handle teaching while also managing their own kids' virtual learning. And then the separation from community and getting all those little nuggets helps you as a leader understand who you have at the table. And so we've been able to extend grace in so many ways that we might not have done prior to COVID. So, yeah.
My thought was flexibility, right? Because one of the things that we focus on at our schools is making sure we're meeting the kids where they are. And that just requires so much flexibility. You basically have to turn into a pretzel to sometimes get these kids to do the things. And so I think that grace and flexibility go together, right? Because you look at a child and you say, this is where you are right now. And I'm gonna meet you in that place, and it doesn't matter what I have to do. I'm gonna love you the way that you are in this minute, and I can change myself for you. I can do what you need.
And I think being mindful and intentional in the different things. So it's important to schedule those times of building community within your faculty and your students, and not just get wrapped up in how are we going to get our academics up, but it's just keeping that intentionality in anything that we do to build that community within our schools.
And I think it's important, and it sounds like everybody here is kind of doing this, but to also recognize the positives that came out of like this experience that we all went through. I look at technology adoption as a big one for my students, like that it's so radically accelerated the technology use amongst my students and my teachers, and that's something that we're bringing through today, right? We still use a lot of those practices in the classrooms, even though now that we're back in person, and I think there's a lot of things like that we can build upon. It doesn't have to be all of the negatives that we do have to address as well.
That's great. And so do you feel like all these things that we're doing on the community, the connection, the grace, the support, the new embracing of technology is going to end up resulting in that achievement gap closing? Or are there other things that are going to have to happen, or is that important?
I love that question, because one of the things that I've been really focused on is making sure that our administration, our real leaders are going and focusing on educating themselves on trauma-informed instruction and things like that, because I do firmly believe that even if you're spending thousands, like if you only have a small budget for professional development, if you are focusing that budget on helping kids to reach that positive state, you are investing thousands more in student achievement, in student involvement, in teacher involvement, in their safety. That is one of the things that I have talked to our principals so often about, because she's like, we're still focusing on this, we still have to put in. It's like, yes, we do, every day. This is what we need to be doing.
Thank you guys so much for sharing your wisdom, sharing your stories, and sharing what you're doing at your schools to make them such amazing places. Obviously, you were all chosen as winners for the Impact Awards for a reason, because you are doing amazing things every day, but I know it doesn't just happen like magic. It takes a lot of hard work and grit, determination, and I feel like that doesn't have to come with anger and division. It comes with the grace and the courtesy and the kindness. You're doing both at the same time, which might feel like a high wire act sometimes, but it's what's really working. And so thank you for that, just kind of on behalf of all parents and kids everywhere for taking that extra step and the extra time to make it work. And thank you very much. And so thank you everybody for joining us today. We really appreciated your time, and hopefully you can bring some kindness, some grace, some courtesy, some compassion and connection back to your school as well. Thank you.
Oh, shit.